A lot of brands, a lot of companies that have a founder as the face of the brand oftentimes have a little bit of a push and pull because they're trying to figure out, okay, well, what are the visuals that my company puts out versus what are the visuals that I have as my personal brand? And how does that work when I'm on stage and I'm speaking? And then how does that need to translate to what my company's website looks like? There's a lot to think about when it comes to visual identity, and that has a lot to do with how you market yourself. And lucky for us, we have Lee Seidenberg with us today. Lee Seidenberg is a visual identity expert. He has a long history of working in marketing, working in visuals. We're going to get into that a little bit later on. And so he's going to chime in a bit on what you need to think about for the face of your brand as well as the company itself. So that way your audience knows what to expect, whether they're encountering you on stage with your most recent speaking engagement or whether they are encountering someone from your company on the website. So, hey, Lee, how's it going?
I'm doing well. Happy Thursday to you.
Happy Thursday
We're
to
almost done with the
you.
week. We're
We
almost
are
there.
almost, this is so true.
Almost
And
there.
I should say that this is On Brand Off the Cuff, the show where I like to talk to other marketers about founders and their companies and how they can market it better so that way those companies can hit their goals. I'm Annie Figginshue. I am the owner of Downstage Media, and I'm so happy to be talking to you, Lee, today. Let's talk about, are you ready? We're just diving
Yeah,
right
let's
in.
do it. Yeah, I'm glad to
Okay.
be here. Thank you.
I want to talk about what are some of the common mistakes that you see companies make when it comes to their visual identity?
Um, well, I think it depends on if we're talking about small businesses, I see, especially businesses that might have uh, a lot of different teams, marketing teams, design teams. Maybe they're outsourcing a lot of their design and visual aesthetics. I think the biggest challenge or one of the biggest things that I see is inconsistency. I
Mm,
see a lot of the small brands that I work with, or a lot of companies that I work with. Um, in terms of their visual identity, in terms of their font usage, in terms of their colors, a lot of companies are inconsistent when it comes to what their website experience is in terms of how the visuals look, in terms
mm,
of the fonts and colors, to how their social media might look, or how their if they're on the website, if there's lead generation and you're getting content from them or email marketing from them, that might feel a little bit inconsistent, from the overall brand. And that might even, I've seen a lot of companies too, when I get into all the different marketing materials that they're having when it comes to even the collateral pieces, or their even business cards, or other sales pieces and presentations, PowerPoints, pitch decks, proposals. I see so many inconsistencies there.
wow. So you're saying that a lot of companies, when they have that's just some of the basic blocking and tackling, it sounds like their fonts are inconsistent, their colors are inconsistent. That's really interesting. And how do you feel like that affects how does that affect the marketing of their company as a whole?
Well, I think we are, as what we do as marketing people, and all my history is working in advertising and as a copywriter and as a creative director, is that companies, they always want to sell their service. They always want to they have a service, they do something really well, they want to sell that, and as marketers and as creative people, what we need to do is we need to change the perspective and go, okay, great, we know you want to sell this, but what can we do to make people want to buy this? So we
Mhm.
have to always think about it from the consumer's point of view. What are they thinking? What other things are going on in their lives? What are they paying attention to? So the more, when we see inconsistency in marketing, um, whether that is conscious or not, we might be thinking, oh, this company may or may not have their shit together when it comes
Right.
to
Mhm.
quality. And I always feel too, because I'm also a photographer and I do headshot photography for companies, and uh even headshot photography, for example, is part of a company's marketing.
Mhm.
So any touch point that you have with internally, if you're a large company, or even external, certainly to your customers, any touch point that you have is your marketing. So how you show up and all those touch points is your marketing. Even your headshots, and what is the story, let's say, for example, for headshots, what is the story that you are telling with your headshots? And if you are just having people submit their own photos and have people take their own photos with their iPhones, you're going to get inconsistency. You're not going to be able to tell the story that your team is likable, approachable, has a sense of confidence and his authority, works cohesive as a team, that you pay attention to details, etc. And certainly that plays through in the visual identity, or all the different marketing touch points that you may have. If you're inconsistent across the board from the emails that you get in terms, and now we're just talking about visual. When I talk about uh, messaging, you work with messaging. I see all the visual touch points as messaging also. Like, what
Sure.
messaging are you sending with your visuals and your aesthetics? So when you see that inconsistency, or things may feel cheap, that might have some kind of subconscious, feelings toward, oh, this company, might cut corners, or they're not paying attention to all the little details, and if they miss those little, like, it's like the green M&Ms theory, the rock star wants green M&Ms, in their dressing room, has nothing to do. They want green M&Ms is just to show that, hey, if they can't pay attention, if the road crew can't pay attention to this one little detail, maybe they can't get the pyrotechnics, correct on the stage. So same
Completely.
thing. So those little things, like, oh, if my emails, are not showing up and they're not really tight and, cohesive, then what else could they possibly miss with, if I'm their customer?
Absolutely. Now, I do just want to point out too that when I was performing both with Chicago City Limits and Broadway's Next Hit Musical, and we would travel around, there was I cannot remember his name, must have been a legend because of what was in his rider, right? Because he was a folk singer, and he would play guitar, and he just needed a stool, he needed a rug, and he needed a microphone and a light. That's all he needed. He put in his rider that he also wanted 20 Swedish masseuses, right? And he had that in his rider because now, like you're saying, Lee, the way that it works is you need someone to go through and with a fine tooth comb say, okay,
And
yes,
question
we're going to
things.
do this. What's
Right,
that?
exactly. Yeah, and question it. And, like,
Yeah,
right, to be like, wait a second, this is a strange request. And if they don't pay attention to that,
exactly.
yeah.
So that's why. So he would know that if they had crossed out, no, we are not going to supply 20 Swedish masseuses for you, then he knew they had read the material and that he was going to get the rug and the stool and the microphone and the light that he needed. So I
Right.
love that you have that. And I think many companies don't realize that's what their brand guidelines can help with. That's
Mhm.
what their brand standards. So so Jim McLeod, I don't know if you're familiar with Jim McLeod. Great guy, super smart. He wrote the book The Visual Marketer. He says in there, the brand style guide is your shield against bad ideas. So I kind of like what you're saying in that you sort of start with your brand guidelines and you just use those consistently across so many different areas that you just talked about, Lee, that I don't think that many companies are thinking about. Pitch decks and proposals, as well as emails, as well as the slides that are going to go on stage. All of these can have the same set of guidelines that you use over and over again. And so many companies don't do that. I find, are you finding that, like, with all of these different places where people can get these assets created for them, Canva or Notebook LM or
Mhm.
Napkin, like all these different tools, then there is a disjointedness. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge is, and I'm talking, a lot of the, like, for example, I'm working with a financial advisory firm, and one of the challenge is that they may be working with a outside vendor to do some of their design work, and a lot of times those outside vendors might what happens is they just start taking orders. They go, oh, we need a new presentation deck, we do this, and then they stick to the brand guidelines, and yes, it may be consistent, but what happens is that there's no one really making smart marketing decisions and really kind of really thinking what is truly right for the brand. So I think one of the biggest challenges and is having the right person who feels like they are on your team, that
Mhm.
really cares about the integrity of your brand and how you're showing up in all the different touch points, um, and um, that you can trust with your brand. Because I think either you have an internal marketing person, and depending on your budget, you might not be able to bring on full time someone who might be really that at a certain level, for example. And if you're
Right.
working with an outside vendor, they're just going to want to just keep the retainer going, and just kind of its output and its hours, and they have to manage a lot of stuff, versus having someone that you can feel like is really on your team. A lot of times I'll come in and I'll work with clients almost in a fractional marketing, you know you know perspective, where I'm working on marketing strategies, but also making sure that when their emails go out, they look a certain way, that their social media posts are starting to feel more, consistent and cohesive, across, all of their different channels. Like, one, I'm working now with a franchise. They have 3 or 4 different separate owners, and they're all over the place. Each owner has their own social media channel. They have their own email list. They even have their own landing pages and websites. And so what happened? It's one brand, right? And so what happens is it's all over the place, and I can't, and I think what's happening is that the brand is disintegrating, because every owner has their one, VA that's, hired on a fractional basis, and they're located, mostly overseas, and they're just outputting social media, but they're not taking into consideration the overall brand aesthetics and what is actually right for the brand. They're just checking off those tasks.
Mhm.
And so I'm coming in, I'm like, oh my God, I broke everything apart. I said, we need to rethink everything. I mean, like, we need to consolidate your email list and tag them specifically for the different locations. We need to they don't really have a brand book, though they have a brand aesthetic, but it's so loosey goosey and it's all over the place. So I'm trying to bring that together and create a very solid brand book. So if their VAs are going to follow and post social media, they're going to have to follow specific rules. But also in terms of having a very social media strategy or an email strategy, they don't have
Mhm.
any of this stuff, because everyone is doing their own. It's like, an octopus with all the legs just working completely independent of each other. And
Yeah.
so, I try to kind of bring that cohesiveness, to organizations like that as well.
What I think is really cool, Lee, about your background is that you have so much, I don't know any other way of saying this, but like taste kind of built into what you do. Can you speak a little bit about your what you work on as a creative director, your past with advertising agencies, the commercials you've worked on, the photography you are still very active in? Can you speak to how that affects the visual marketing projects that you do for your clients now?
Um, yeah, okay. My background, so I do a little bit of everything. So growing up, I was an artist, and I thought I was going to be an artist. I was drawing and painting and illustration, and I just knew I was going to be an artist. So my first year of college, I went to Pratt Institute for Fine Art, and was my I thought I just was going to be just a starving artist, and then I don't think I was mature enough for college, at that time. And also, the first year was a foundation year, and I found it very basic and boring. And uh, anyway, I wasn't really happy with where things were going, and I stopped going and took some time off. At the time, I was also really into photography. I was working full time in a photo lab where I was developing film, and it was a 1 hour photo lab, if you remember those back
Yeah.
in the day. And so I was developing film. It was a retail store also, so I was working with customers. I was going in the dark room, so a lot of photography. But it was always a passion of mine, but it was always in the background. So then I went to community college for a couple years, and I had a teacher, and I thought I wanted to go into illustration, and just illustrate children's books, or movie posters, or whatever. And a teacher convinced me to go to the School of Visual Arts and learn graphic design and learn the computer because, the computer is where things are going to be
Those
happening.
newfangled things.
These crazy things called the computer.
They're crazy.
So I
They're
did
good
that.
at
So
everything, those computers these days.
yeah, who
You
knew?
know
Who
what I
knew?
mean?
I know.
Goodness.
So that's what I did. I went to School of Visual Arts. I studied graphic design with the idea that I will work in graphic design and then I will do illustration on the side for whatever, And so part of that curriculum, the graphic design curriculum, I had to take a basic advertising course. And I didn't know anything about advertising. I thought advertising was like drawing storyboards, I didn't really, understand. But it was all about how to, write ads and that, influence people. And from there, I was just kind of sold. I learned about advertising, and one of my teachers, worked at a small boutique, award-winning advertising agency in New York City called DeVito Verde, and I was just hooked. And so I switched majors my senior year. I double majored and then switched to advertising, and then graduated. Got hired right out of school at an advertising agency. And
Mhm.
then I did that, so I wrote, TV commercials for big brands. So I got a lot of experience working on a much, a large level. If you ever watch Mad Men, it was just like that, but I didn't drink as much and certainly didn't look as cool. But it was basically that.
Okay, I disagree on the looking as cool, because let's see here. I want to pull up I mean, like, this is how you know that Lee is someone who does like creative stuff. Like, people don't have this on their websites if they're not in like the creative, the visual world. Like, he's got the cool angles. He's figured out how to make, it's black and white. It's just this whole deal, right? Like, so I dare say that you probably were as cool as the Mad Men peeps,
I
in
followed a
some
very
way.
specific brand book for myself. So
Good. I love that. Great. Okay. So what I would like to know is, a lot of the companies that I work with oftentimes have one sort of face of the brand, one subject matter expert, and then that person has a sort of what I think of as a stage manager, the person who then implements a lot of the marketing, a lot of those tasks. They may not necessarily have an entire marketing team. They usually don't, but they have just that one person who I sort of think of the stage manager, or the, pardon the gendered term, but the right hand man, right? So, so then what do you think is something that companies could be focusing on right now, right? So that one person who is tasked with creating these elements, and they want to use all these different tools, and they want to make sure that they are telling a cohesive story, that they are telling visual, making the look and the feel of the company the same. What should they be doing? Like, what should they be focusing on right now in order to make that happen in a satisfying way?
I think it. I think uh, it's clarity and consistency.
Mhm.
I think again. Well, I think our brains are so overloaded with visuals, with content, with social media, with messaging, with the news, with just trying to balance work life. Just there's so much stuff going on with our brains, especially if you have families and kids. Like, it's too much. Like, I think we're at the point where I feel like technology hit its peak in like 2010 or 2009 after the iPhone came out, and we
Sure.
were able to message people, you check our emails, get on the internet, for just communication purposes. But really, before the social media, really kind of, kicked in, all that the technology, I think, at a point was making our lives better, and then it completely nosedived. And I think all of the stuff that's going on now is making our lives, you know, um, worse. I think we're not, I think we're facing with so many challenges, more challenges than we're even capable of handling, especially now with AI and everything. So consistency and clarity. So I think, and going back to, you're a story brand certified guide, and that's what you do with your clients, and messaging, and making sure messaging is very, 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 very clear, that I know right away the problems that you solve, for your clients, and how you are the person to help them, survive and thrive, and then just repeating that over and over and over again, just so when someone sees, the founder or the face of the brand, they just know what problems that person company solves, so people right away go, oh, that's for me, that's not for me, oh, and then how you solve those problems and what the results are. I think those are the two main things to concentrate on nowadays, is just clarity and consistency.
Love it. Love it. Yes. Clarity and consistency is so important. And I know that you can get twitchy working in your own brand, right? Like you've been working on this company for a long time. It's, oh, this font again, and this color again, and this and this and this, and it gets boring. Look, people, I mean, I like to think about Broadway shows that are running 8 times a week. Chicago, the revival of Chicago has been open for almost, I think it's upwards of 30 years at this point, right? Like
Mhm.
it's the same show every time, and audiences like it, and they know what to expect. They know what they're going to see.
I think,
And yeah,
yeah, sorry.
go
But
ahead.
that goes back to even the bigger brands. I mean, the reason why big brands succeed is because of consistency. We all know, I mean, you've heard this a million times before. McDonald's does not serve the most delicious hamburger, but no matter where you go in the world and to get a McDonald's hamburger, it's going to be exactly the same. And you go
Yeah.
into these big brands and you have these experiences with the brands, it's all about consistency. Like, I know what I'm going to get when I go and interact with a branding company.
Yeah. So speaking of branding companies, if people want to learn how, if they want to learn more about their visual identity, how they can strengthen it, how they can clarify it, how they can be consistent with it, where's the best place for them to go to find you?
Find me.
Yeah, find you,
Find me.
Lee.
So my company is called VC5. I like to call it a holistic marketing and design agency because I don't separate any. There are website companies that just do website design. There are companies that just do social media. There are companies that just do branding and design. Because of my background and because I do everything from, writing to graphics to photography to a lot of technology and websites and automations and lead generation. I like to look at everything as a whole, so, I call it holistic marketing design. VC5, it's just a random name. It doesn't mean anything. But in terms of VC5agency.com is my website. Um, yeah, so that's, I don't know. Yeah.
Great. So that's where people can find you to
That's where
find out
people can find
more.
it. Sorry. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, so then one last thing that I just wanted to ask you about. What is sort of a final perspective that you think that companies really should be considering right now? Like what is something that you want to tell people more? Like when you're looking at people's websites, for example, and you're or not people's websites, but companies' websites, right? And if you look at 5 company websites, most likely 3 of them are all going to have this issue with their visual identity. And what would you say that issue is that people can make a simple tweak to adjust?
Uh, um, in terms of visual, I would say consistency, and clarity. Those are the two main things. So when I go to a website, I think a lot of times I will have a hard time understanding what it is I am supposed to do on the website. So in terms of the story that is on the website, a lot of times I'm just not even sure if it's relative to me or not. I think in terms of the graphics, I'm not sure exactly what I'm supposed to do in terms of contact. Am I supposed to fill out a form? Am I supposed to browse through all the different pages? So I think a lot of my philosophy is that most companies kind of build their brands backwards. So they start with, and I think a lot of people are really guilty of this. They start with the website design first, like have a company, let's build a website, and they start cramming all the information into the website. And when you do that, you tend to have a website that may not function the way you want it to because it's not thoughtful. It's not built from, I like to build things from the inside out. So um, you might be um, confusing your website visitors on exactly the problems that you are solving for them and the action that you want them to take.
Great. Makes sense. Yeah. So if you're looking at websites, oftentimes it's not very clear. There's a lot of visual clutter. And so it's not clear what it is that the user is supposed to be doing on the site. So that is great. That is great to know. So when you are working on your visuals, when you're putting out your next piece of marketing collateral, even your next social media post, it's worthwhile to make sure you head back to those brand guidelines so that way you're consistent and that you're clear in what it is that you're telling people, not just with the words that you're using, but also the look and the feel of the brand. So thank you so much, Lee, for telling us about this, for shedding some light on the visuals that we all need to keep in mind. And to keep up with On Brand Off the Cuff, you can go to downstage.media/blog. You can subscribe there and you'll be able to see the posts that we have. I'm going to be creating a blog post about this. Is coming out with the notes where you could get more information about Lee, where you could pick up the visual marketer book, but all of that is going to be at downstage.media/blog. Thank you again, Lee, and we'll see you all next time.
Thank you. Appreciate